Tonight's conversation delves into everyday issues that face the transgender community. Mara Kiesling, Executive Director of the National Center for Transgender Equality, and political theorist Paisley Currah discuss the future of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act and how legislation designed to protect trans people from discrimination in public spaces is currently under attack from the religious right.
So, Mara, you are the founding executive director of the National Center for Transgender Equality, and I know you work at the national level, or the federal government level. What other kind of levels does NCT work at?
We've tried our hardest to focus on federal policy. I should say federal policy or issues of national significance. What's happening now is the radical right has decided that they're losing the marriage battle. I think, they know they won Proposition 8, but they know they won by the skin of their teeth and it'll never happen again. And they're looking now at another way to keep attacking LGBT people and another way to raise money, another way to fill the pews of attacking transgender ordinances that have been passed. As you know, as somebody who used to keep track of this stuff very, very carefully, when it was happening one every couple months.
Right.
Now that there's just such a flood of victories, it's a little harder. But 12 months or so, whenever one of these ordinances is passed in a city or a state, the radical right people who pay attention to these things and are looking for a new fight, depending on the jurisdiction and what the rules are, try to get these things on the ballot to be repealed. And what they do, what they believe is their best argument, which is totally fabricated in their minds, is that transgender women such as me will somehow be a threat to your little girl in the bathroom. Despite there being not a single case in 30 years of these laws being on the books, not a single case of this ever happening. They're using this, and we saw it in Montgomery County, Maryland, where they did some really horrible ads about men sneaking into locker rooms to molest children. And in Colorado, when a public accommodations law was passed there, Focus on the Family did some work to try to get Governor Ritter not to sign it, and again used these men in dresses in the bathroom with your little girl scare tactics. I mean, the argument they're making is this will allow people to use the wrong bathrooms, which it doesn't. None of these laws do that.
Well, it's interesting because most of these laws either have guidelines or we hope that they'll be interpreted to mean that people in these jurisdictions with these specific non-discrimination laws have access to the bathrooms that, are in accordance with their gender identity. And what's interesting, I think, is that the assumption is that transgender people don't exist, that transgender people are in fact frauds, that transgender women are actually only men in dresses who want to harass women in bathrooms. And the child thing, I think, is a new wrinkle. They used to say just like men in dresses going into women's rooms to harass women. I remember running into a trans woman from New Jersey and having a conversation, and she was just very funny. She's like, yeah, exactly. I went to therapy, I did hormone treatment, surgery, electrolysis, just so I could go to the women's bathroom and harass women. Like, that was the easiest way for me to sexually harass women, is to go through all those, to transition. And it's just like, from the trans community's perspective, it's just totally absurd. But I think from the right wing's perspective, it's just the sense that trans people don't really exist. They're just frauds, just men in dresses who are, and I don't even know what they say about transgender men. Like, what, we want to go into men's bathrooms and harass men? I mean, it does play on everybody's fear, or not everybody's, but people's fear. Like, people want to have privacy, safety, security, like wherever they are, but also in the restrooms. The folks who don't have it are often transgender people. Like, there's trans people are at risk when they, use restrooms, or gender nonconforming people. They're the ones who really need safety and security and privacy. But it does kind of play on those fears, and like breastfeeding moms and parents changing diapers, and people in wheelchairs. Everybody wants like a safe, clean, hassle-free bathroom experience, and the existence of a transgender rights law is not going to make that worse. What makes people's bathroom experience, better or worse is just these basic issues of safety and security. And trans people need the safety and security probably even more.
Well, Paisley, 2008, there was a lot of coverage of the story of Thomas Beatty, who I think a lot of the world knows as the pregnant man. And with reproductive technologies just being created all the time and developed further, trans people are going to have more and more options. And I think the public just has to understand that we're like everybody else, just trying to do the best we can with the options that are available to us. And that's, to I think a lot of trans people, that's really the moral of the story. It was one person's story, or one couple's story, and what they were trying to do was have a family.
What I thought was interesting was the media coverage of that one individual's reproductive life and the relative lack of coverage of like the huge issue that faced transgender communities in the debate over the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. So lots of folks in America became aware that there was a transgender man who was pregnant. Very few knew that all the kind of parliamentary maneuverings about cutting gender identity from the main non-discrimination bill going on in Washington. So the article was talking about like why focus on that and not getting into thinking about a really important policy issue that affects like so many more transgender folks in the U.S. Maybe this is a good segue into figuring out what's going to happen now, because no one I think knows better than you do. That's my idea. With the new version of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, are people going to be able to? Are the American public ready to include transgender people in the bill?
I'm optimistic that the DSM revisions are going to go the way they need to go. I'm very optimistic that the Employment Non-Discrimination Act is going to pass in the next maybe couple, you would say the next 2 years just to be safe, maybe as early as this year. But trans people and allies all over the country are doing the work to educate the public, to educate policymakers, to educate their therapists. You know, it's interesting. One of the things we used to talk about, 10 years ago is how transgender people had to educate their healthcare providers, whether it be a therapist or a mental health provider or a physical health provider. And I think more and more people are finding healthcare providers. Still, there's a lot of folks in particularly rural places where this isn't true. But in big cities now, you ask around, you can find some caregivers who are really trans supportive and trans competent. And that's helping with all the policy work we're doing. It's helping with the DSM revisions now. And that's all because thousands of trans people are out there stepping out and stepping up.